Hey folks, it's Andrew here from Home Theatre Engineering. Today we're talking about the 10 essential steps required to build the perfect home cinema. Okay, so here we go. Now before we kick off, there are a couple of assumptions that I'm going to take when I talk about these points. First of all, I'm talking about projectors. Why? Well, we see the world as reflected light. When you look at a house, a person, a car, what you see is light reflected off that object, and that's exactly how a projection screen works. So it's something that we actually relate to a little better than a TV. TVs can look very nice and sharp, but they're also a little bit harsh, and in some senses a little bit unrealistic because all of that light is emanated, right? The other thing is we're trying to emulate the kind of romantic idea of a commercial cinema where we used to go perhaps with our parents as kids or with our friends, and that's what we're trying to emulate in the room. It's also the way really that movies were meant to be seen. Also, we can currently get a larger screen size for the cost, and we also have an ability to provide a widescreen experience without those black bars. And for me, one of the biggest deals is in a proper cinema setup at home, we can place the speakers behind the screen, just like in a cinema, so that sound is coupled. And as the action moves across the screen, the sound moves with it proportionally. So that's assumption number one, okay, that we're talking about projectors. Assumption number two, I'm talking about actually building a cinema experience in your home, and not just a media room. This isn't a lounge room with a 5.1. This is actually a cinema, okay? This means we're going the distance to manage the actual room and environment. So we're looking after ambient light, sound, acoustics, etc. And we'll talk about that soon. This is all to maximize sound and image effect. We also are trying to eliminate the exit door effect, as we call it, and that's get rid of any distractions in the room. We're trying to achieve a willing suspension of disbelief, and we're aiming to see and hear what the creators of that art actually intended. Okay, so here we go, step one. Now, in terms of all of the components that are going to go into a home theatre, the most critical are knowledge and having a plan, a design for your room. This is simply the most critical component of all. You need to know what you're doing, what you plan to do, and how to do the calculations and the measurements and the things that you need to work out to make it all work. And there are really two ways of going about this. The first one is effectively doing it yourself, where you study and learn, but this takes time. You need to go and get the information you need to bring this all together. But some challenges are things like, who do you listen to? And there are too many self-appointed experts out there. I mean, you might say, well, why should you listen to me? And hopefully my experience and my qualifications will explain that, and maybe have a look at our other videos and see if you believe that we know what we're talking about. But this can still cost money. You might need to do courses and read books, and also make sure that you're only dealing in facts and not just conjecture and opinion. Deal only with measured facts, physical rules of sound and video, and look, be careful of what we call confirmation bias. You see this a lot on YouTube at the moment, where someone puts, for example, that egg carton foam all around the room, and then they clap their hands and go, wow, that's different. Yes, it's different. And the change has confirmed that they think they've done a good job, but in fact, the sound is not necessarily better. All right. So we need to have knowledge to know that the changes we've made are actually beneficial. The other way to go it is to pay an expert. But again, who are the experts? These days it's hard to tell. There's no rules that say that you can't say that you're a home theatre expert. People have got it all over their vans, all over their shops, and yet they know nothing about what they're doing. They might know the equipment they're selling, but that's very different to the environment of a home theatre. Look for years of experience. This can be nothing too, though, unfortunately, because you can be doing something for a long time and be doing it badly. I would suggest looking for certification, ISF, HAA, THX, PVA and others. This stuff isn't cheap, so it means that they've been willing to invest in their education. They've had to sit through it, they've had to do tests, they've had to get certified, and also make sure that they're still doing it. I constantly sit through ISF, HAA and PVA courses to try and keep my education up, and I'm always looking for new information. Look for your specialist owning test equipment, especially audio and video test equipment. We'll talk about that a bit more. And also, if they refer to the experts in the industry, the people who have really done the hard yards, people like Floyd Toole out in Everest, people who ran training courses before, John Dahl, Jerry LeMay of the HAA, Joel Silver, and you know, people throughout industry who have done the hard work. And if people are referring to those, it also means they don't think that they are a self-appointed guru, but they actually, you know, are willing to refer to the knowledge of people who have done the research. I think another thing is testimonials and referrals. These can be tricky because the average customer doesn't know their suppliers actually delivered the best results. All you have to do is do a better job than the last job, and then your customers can think that that's the best that they'll ever get, and they'll give you a glowing referral, but in fact the room may be far from good. You know, so you know, if you have a coffee and then you have a nicer coffee, you might think that's the best coffee you've ever had, and it is, but it's by no means the best coffee. And this is where, you know, certification, calibration, measuring is really, really important. Okay. Also, in dealing with a professional, make sure they work to the specifications of the industry and the content creators, the people who create the standards. For example, Dolby, and we'll talk about that a bit more. That they take these measurements, that they have these tools that I talked about, and they show you the results and will certify your job with organisations like the Professional Video Alliance, like HAA and ISF, etc. Also, that they initially pay attention not to the equipment they're going to sell you or to your wallet, but to the room in terms of your dreams, your usage, seating, lighting, control and acoustics. It's the room that's going to make or break it, and I'll talk about that in more detail. And finally, that they actually listen to you and listen to your needs and what you really want, and that they explain the process as they go. I had a thought the other day. Imagine buying cars the way we buy home theatres. You know, you go out and you see a car and it looks amazing and you think, yeah, I'll buy that car. And you go to the dealership and say, I'll buy that car over there. And then you go and pick it up and all of the components of that car are in a box. You're now going to need an expert to help you assemble that car and make it work. But a car is actually one complete ecosystem. The seats are a certain distance from the pedals and the steering wheel. The airbags are aimed to hit you at the, you know, precise location. Imagine if the airbags went off on the outside of the car. The wiring harnesses, you know, and the ECU has been programmed to measure the way the car's functioning and to adjust the engine and the brakes and even the gears now in a way that is safest and most efficient. If you don't have an expert helping you build the car, then testing it, then verifying it, then tuning it, well, you know, who knows what you're going to get. And this does happen. This happens in the factory though. All of the components, just like a home theatre, come from all over the world. They're assembled in the plant. They're put together by experts or machines. Then they are tested and they are then programmed and then they are validated. And some cars are tested on the track, and then they're quality assured, and then once they're actually all working so that when you turn the key in the dealership you can just drive it off smooth as silk, then, you know, that's all done. It's the finished environment, it's the total package. Unfortunately, the way we sell home theatres are, here's your boxes, we'll send an installer over, and you have to cross your fingers and hope the installer actually knows what he's doing and isn't someone who can just plug stuff together. So, unfortunately, you know, our industry is a little bit difficult like that. You can't tell who the experts are. You get all the bits, and unfortunately for us, providing you get a sound and picture, everybody thinks the job is done. Okay, but you've spent all the good money on the gear. You deserve to get all of the performance that is in that equipment. We're not saying that you have to pay any more for the equipment. We're saying that optimize the equipment that you have and get the most out of it. Get what you paid for. All right, so point one is invest in knowledge. Get a plan and design the room before you start. This is the most important factor in getting it right, and most so-called professionals even get this wrong. Okay, so that's step one. Knowledge, a plan, design your room. Step two is the room itself. You've probably heard me say in other videos, the room is boss. But think about the room. The room will exert itself on the image and sound without doubt or hesitation, and if you ignore the room, you do so at your own peril. Which way is this room going to work? What orientation will it be? What can we do with doors, windows and recesses, etc.? What about painting the room and ambient light and reflected light in the room? How's that going to impact the screen? What about blocking external light from coming in? What about power availability, cabling capabilities? What about air conditioning, the noise of it and the cooling effect? What about acoustics? We need to manage acoustics in the room. This is probably more important than many other things. Don't use that cheap eggshell foam. Be wary of curtains unless you know what you're doing. Don't use commercial and industrial sound treatments because they're actually designed for home theatres or music environments. They're just designed to absorb voice, generally, like in a restaurant or in a commercial venue. So we don't want to just take voice out. We don't want that kind of bias in the room. So invest in getting the room acoustics right. So you want to control the sound, the light, the heat, and the comfort. Okay, speaking of comfort, step 3 are seats. Now, I'm not so fussed about how the seats are actually constructed, as long as they don't have a super high back and block all the sound behind you. But the big question is, how many people are really going to use this room? You can often tell a really good home theatre expert because what they will do is they will sit you down and say, tell me about your room. How many people are going to use it? Is it just you and your partner? Is it you and kids? Is it all the kids from the neighbourhood? Is it all your family and friends? Do we need 2 seats or 30 seats? What are we doing with this room? And genuinely, how many people use it on a regular basis? If we try to get 30 seats in this room, this is going to be really hard work and probably very expensive. But if you really genuinely are just going to be, you and your partner at night, well, then we really probably only need 2, maybe 3, 4, 5 seats. This is something that needs to be discussed. Then you need to work out whether in that size of room, this seating will work with your correct speaker locations, your screen size, distance and type, projector location, and all those sorts of things. So for all of these, we need to do calculations. So this becomes actually a circular process. It's not so much a bullet point list, but more of a flow chart. So once we've organised step 3, the seats, we've got some answers, we then actually need to go and do step 4 and 5. And as you'll hear later, we circle back to step 3 to make sure that it's all working. Step 4. This is your audio chain. Speakers, processors, and amplifiers. How many channels are you going to have and why? Are you going to start with 5.1? Are you going straight into 11.4.4? Or are you going to start at 5.1 and then are you going to slowly step up? And be careful here because you want to plan for the future. For example, your left and right surrounds and your top center Atmos actually shift in location if you change other speaker configuration. So if you go from 5.1 to 7.1, you can actually see on the Dolby website that there's a shift in your left and right surrounds. Are you going to cater for all of the rows? And also some of the rules actually need to be broken. Dolby really gives out those diagrams for distinct speaker locations for generally 1 row of seats. If you've got multiple rows of seats, the rules have to change a little bit and you have to understand that. Okay. If you think about it and it makes common sense, the front Atmos needs to be in front of everybody and the rear Atmos needs to be behind everybody, and that can be challenging in terms of angles and placement. Okay, so go by the rules, have a look at Dolby.com and look, don't let anyone tell you otherwise. If your installer comes in and says, hey, look, let's just put your surrounds in the ceiling just next to the Atmos, it's nice and tidy. What he's saying is, I can't be bothered cabling up properly. I can't be bothered doing the work. This is a quick fix for me. I'll be in the ceiling, I'll cut some holes, I'll throw your speakers in and she'll be right. That's not how it works for you. All right, so make sure the speakers go where they go. Now, why is this important? Well, there are people who have dedicated their lives, their careers, to sitting in a studio with speakers in that precise and accurate Dolby location, for example, and they spend their time steering the sound to those speakers and creating the ambience. So if they want your cinema to sound like you're sitting in an auditorium, then they'll add that to the mix. If they want it to sound like you're out, in the open amongst the trees, they'll add that to the mix. If they want it to sound like you're in a shower recess or a car park, they'll add that to the mix. And then they will send the appropriate sounds to the speakers, knowing that you've got those speakers in the same position. If you don't, well, what happens then is you're either sitting in front of the sound or behind the sound, or it's above you or below you, or it's just completely flat. And you are not experiencing what they experienced when they put all that effort into the mix. So the magic is in the mix. It's already baked into the soundtrack, which is another reason that I'm not really a big fan of things like these effects that are in amplifiers. You know, look, if you want to have sort of a stadium sound for your sports, well, okay, that's fine, you know, fill your boots. But because today the effects are in the soundtrack, you don't need all of those funky effects. So that's why I'm not a big fan of those effects in Yamaha processors, because people accidentally hit buttons and the sound just goes really weird, and you're not experiencing what it is that the director intended. I would love Yamaha to take all that stuff out, because, you know, kids press buttons on remotes and things like that, and then the sound of the room just falls apart. So yeah, just bear in mind that that's, you know, that's the way it is now. And as we have more and more channels in the mix and in the room, that we can now create those environments. And that's what having correct speaker location is all about. Now, here's the thing. If you skip the whole room design and planning part, you may have some issues with speaker locations, because you've suddenly got to put a speaker where there's a doorway or a hallway. It means you didn't do your planning, so you go back to point one and start again. All right. Now, the other thing is, what kind of speakers? We don't use tower speakers. And look, that's a whole video on its own, and in fact, we've already done one. The thing is, the subwoofers are in the tower speakers, and tower speakers are big, and they're designed really for stereo music. When you went to the cinema, you probably never saw tower speakers left and right of the screen, right? We want to separate the subwoofers out and be able to manipulate that sound around the room. So we never, ever design a room with tower speakers. But if you have them and you don't want to sell them, then we can work with it. And also, we've done hybrid rooms that go from stereo to 5.1. And we have actually put tower speakers behind screens, and we've worked with customers, you know, especially those on a budget who, you know, like their tower speakers and want to use them. And we've turned those into really nice home theaters as well. So it can be done. All right, other decisions are, what sort of tweeters do you want in your speakers? Do you want dome tweeters, compression drivers, ribbon tweeters? And this all speaks to frequency response, distance to seat, sensitivity, power and accuracy. So many questions. All right, so you need to do some research there. You also need to timbre match your speakers, or timbre match your speakers, so that as the sound moves around the room, it all is consistent. Okay, you really want your sound not to grab your attention. And if you've got a speaker that sounds really odd, then you are going to notice that. Understand the sensitivity of your speakers, all right? This is relevant to amplify power and distance. You want to be able to produce 105 dB SPL at your listening position. Why? Not because we're going to run, you know, your sound system that loud. That's sort of approaching, you know, jet engine loud. But what we are saying is, if your system can reproduce 105 dB SPL without distortion at your listening position, with clarity and detail, then you have all of the dynamics that you need. And that means the people making the soundtrack can work with the loudest and quietest sounds and deliver that to you. By the way, a quick note there, you need to keep your room quiet. Get rid of fan noises, air conditioning noises, and other, you know, refrigerator noises. You need to have your room as quiet as possible. Anything above, you know, below that noise floor in the soundtrack is not going to be heard. So the quieter your room is, the more detail and more amazing clarity you'll get in your room. Think about codecs and understand that as well. Some people put in front, left and right wide speakers, and that's perfectly legitimate, but they're not used always in every soundtrack. So you need to understand what you're doing and why again. Subwoofers are important. We manage room modes and sound in a room a lot with subwoofers, all right? So we recommend 2 at the very least. And then that allows us to put them in locations around the room, which we test, and then we align the subwoofers so that they're working with the speakers perfectly, and then we get really nice bass in a room. Okay, so once you've finished this, this is step 4, you need to go back to step 3, which is your seats, and make sure that that is still valid. Okay? Step 5 is the screen. So first of all, you need to decide on a screen type. Acoustically transparent, which type of acoustically transparent? Or is it going to be a standard screen? If it is acoustically transparent, is it going to be microperf or woven? And what kind of weave are you going to have? What sort of aspect ratio are you going to use, 16:9 or widescreen? And with widescreen, is it going to be 2.35, 2.37, 2.39 or 2.40? We work with 2.35. I've got reasons for that. It's got to do with the black bars on the left and right. If you do a 2.40 screen and you show 2.35 movie, you end up with black bars on the side. And there is a safe zone in movies that, you know, the directors generally don't put critical information in, so I don't mind losing some of that onto the light absorbing border of our screens. And that way, the customer never experiences any black bars, and we work with constant image height. What about gain? So you'll see cinema gain detailed. This will be a number from 1, 1.1, 1.2, maybe 1.3. We would never personally go above 1.3, and only in specific cases with certain room sizes and width of seats, projector light output. This is all considered when we order the screen. But most of all, folks, calculate the screen size, and you need to do this based on things like viewing angles and distances, and the projector as well. This comes into it. But you need to take into effect all factors. What sort of weave is on the screen? How close can you sit to that weave without seeing it? What about the projector resolution and the detail of the pixels on the screen? The way the pixels are created by your projector has an impact on the screen design. What about light output, aspect ratio again? Luminance is a big deal. So you need to know, what is the light output of your projector? And don't forget, this is based on white light output. The advertised, they obviously take the biggest numbers to impress you, but it's not based on the luminance of your primaries, your red, greens, and blues. Check this video out for more information on that and find out what you're probably missing out on. And this is an area where a lot of cheaper projectors fall down. They can be very white and bright and punchy, but in terms of color luminance, then they can really miss out, okay? So, after you've done that, go back to step 3 and 4. We're on step 5, which is screen at the moment. So go back to your seats and then go back to your audio chain and make sure everything there is valid, and you may have to start again. If you move your seats or you move your speakers or you change your screen size, you're going to have to recalculate everything. We have to do it all the time, over and over again. Okay? Step 6. This is the projector. Okay, you need to work out what projector will work with your screen, your room, your seats, and your budget. All right. So you have decisions to make, like, will it be DILA? Will it be SXRD? Will it be LCOS or DLP? Will it have a color wheel or not? What will your light source be? Will it be a UHP lamp? Will it be LED? Will it be laser? Optics. How good is your lens going to be? If you get a cheap projector, it's a cheap plastic lens. So your image is going to be softer than that of, you know, a more expensive projector with good glass elements. What about color accuracy? You know, what experience and reference have you got with that? If you just look at the first projector you see, it's going to look amazing. But if you then stack that up against the better projectors, you're going to start to realize what you're missing out on. Now, a quick word on this, on value. We get some really strange comments about people, from people about products that we have shown and reviewed. And we've looked at some very expensive products that even I probably won't own. And people turn around and get quite angry. It's like, you know, you call that value, it's $50,000. Look, the thing is, value is very personal. For some, owning a Bugatti Veyron, paying $1 million for a car is great value. For some of us, owning a push bike is great value. Right? It is in the eye of the beholder. So let's leave those comments aside. If you think this is important to you and you have saved the money to do it, and it's something that you want, and you know, it fills a place in your life, then that's good value, and we're not going to argue with that. You know where you're at with that, all right? But let's respect everybody's opinion on what is a good value. Okay? Throw ratio for your projector. Will the image fit the screen? Oh my God, the number of rooms I've been to where installers have got this wrong and then used all sorts of weird tricks to try and get an image to fit a screen, including masking and cropping images in the strangest ways and not telling the customer. I went out to one not too long ago where they couldn't get the projector low enough, so they zoomed out so the image was way bigger than the screen, then cropped it in, and then the customer couldn't work out why half his picture was missing. All right, it's just rubbish installations. All right, so do the calculations, make sure that your image will fit the screen, and as I said, don't work at the limits of the lens. Otherwise, you'll end up with a very soft image. Okay. Image luminance. Is there enough light to create a decent image? You need 14.7 foot lamberts for Rec 709 and an absolute minimum of 35 foot lamberts to start working with HDR, so UHD, DCI, P3 color spaces with your high dynamic range. That's probably a whole subject in itself. You can get great HDR with projectors. You do need more light output, but there is a point where you actually inject so much light into the room that it becomes self-defeating. All right, what other capabilities and features do we need to consider in our projector? What about the noise of the projector? What about the heat of the projector? What about resolution? You know, resolution is actually about the 5th lowest on my list of important criteria. And it's not so much about the resolution, it's about how the pixels are formed within the projector. So the cheap projectors, they're E-shift and they've got a mesh or a grid formation with the pixels, and they actually don't make really nice images. At a glance, they look fine. You know, they really do. And if you haven't seen anything else, then they look fantastic. But again, you know, it depends what your reference point is. Are you going to zoom or use an anamorphic lens? If you are going to use an anamorphic lens, make sure you understand your throw ratios. You're going to have to recalculate those and watch out for things like pincushion distortion so that your image actually squarely fits your screen. If you're zooming your projector, then you're actually losing 30% of your pixels off the top and bottom, and you're also losing light output as well. You're not using all of the chip in your projector, so you know you are paying a price to try and get that anamorphic or widescreen look. Okay, so once you've selected your projector and done all your measurements, go back to steps 3 and 4 and 5 and see if they're still valid. All right, again, this circular process. If your projector's not going to work with your screen, you're going to have to change something. And if your screen's going to change, well, then you've got to change your seats maybe, which means you've got to change your seat speaker locations. Everything is tied together, okay? All right, step 7, installation. You need to get your heights, your angles, your locations, your distances all correct. You need to make sure that your cables are correct for, you know, rated for going in wall. Make sure that you get rid of any rattles, that all your connectors are good, that your HDMI cables are valid and that they work. Test your HDMI cable on your equipment before you put it in the roof. And also make sure that you're getting all of your video signals. So make sure you're getting 4K, UHD, HDR, 60 Hertz on your projector, assuming it's capable of that, before you put it in the roof. Don't put it in the roof and then find it doesn't work. And you should get your installers to do the same. Again, the number of jobs I've gone to where the HDMI cable is not suitable and the installer has to come out, remove it from the ceiling, replace it with another cable, and they still put it in the ceiling, they test it, it still doesn't work. It's crazy. Okay. So I'm not going to dwell on installation. It just needs to be done properly. And, you know, you have to bear in mind with equipment, things like cooling of equipment, ventilation, and lighting. Keep, have some lighting so you can see your equipment. You can turn on, so have a work light, but also make sure that your signal lights aren't creating an exit door effect in your room. Okay? You want to make sure that you aren't distracted when you're actually enjoying the movie. Okay. We're down to the last 3. This is step 8, setup. This is the configuration of your equipment. Is everything connected properly and has it been tested? You would be amazed at the number of speakers out of factories that are actually wired incorrectly. We find that the tweeter and the subwoofer are out of phase. Now some are designed to be, so be careful there. We've had tweeters not connected. We've had whole speakers not connected internally. Maybe it's also happened in transit. The crossover has been shaken and something's gone wrong there. Make sure that your speakers and subs are set up correctly. I went to a house a while ago and the guy said, "Oh, I really love the bass. I'd like to crank up my subwoofer." And when I had a look and I tested, there was no tone, and he plugged it into the wrong RCA connector on the back of the AVR. He had never had a subwoofer working. Which is that kind of confirmation bias again. I love my bass. You don't have any. Okay, so these are the things to look out for, and they're really, really important. So What we do is when we set up a system, we measure and check level, phase, distortion and frequency response of every single speaker. Then we know they're all working, all right? And then you make sure that your AVR settings or processor settings are right, that your speaker configuration is right, and test this. Send a test tone and make sure it comes from the speakers that it says it's coming from. Also little things like update your firmware, check your network configurations and stuff. And then do the obvious, put your distances, put your levels, get your bass management sorted out. That's complex, all right? Most people don't understand that there are actually two different bass signals that go to your subwoofer. You've got your actual bass management, and then you've got your LFE signal, all right? And that confuses people sometimes. Make sure you understand the codecs and what they work and do and how. And you know which ones you're going to watch. Are you going to put it on Dolby Surround or Neural X, which is your DTS signal, and so on and so forth. What about your source settings? Make sure they're all set up properly. Make sure your Apple TV's set up right. Check out our video on Apple TV. Okay. On your projector, make sure that your lens settings, if you've got a widescreen configuration, make sure you know how to switch to that. Maybe your amplifier has some settings. Set up your triggers properly, and maybe some XLR and RCA selectors. Okay, step 9. Probably the second most important component in my mind, at least, because this is the only way that we know for our customers that we have actually done everything right. And this is calibration. All right. So planning it right, getting the knowledge and plan design at the beginning, and then calibrating at the end. This is the verification process. This is the quality control. This is what they do when they're finished building your car and they put it through the tests before they release it off the production line. They calibrate a car. Well, we calibrate home theaters. We measure the picture, and we actually, when we're doing a video calibration, we reduce errors. We're actually literally reducing errors. It's called, we're adjusting the delta E, or the change in error, and we make sure that we have wrung every drop of performance out of that projector, and the same out of the sound system. You know, we have reached the limits. We don't know how to get any more out of that room. And then we can give that information to you, and you know that the best has been done. You know that you can go to bed at night not wondering if something's been missed. All right. You also have a baseline. Okay. It also means that you can trust what you're watching. And if you have any doubts, it's normally in the source material and not in your system. But a word of warning there, if you've got a good system, you are going to see flaws in the source material. Okay, just understand that, and then have some reference material, which I'll talk about now. Okay, so get your system calibrated, folks. Just do it. It does cost money, but we need to look at home theaters in the whole ecosystem. People at the moment look at the cost of a home theater and go, that's the hardware, that's all the home theater costs. Some forget the cost of installation. Oh, okay, so it's the hardware and the installation. No, it's not. It's the knowledge, it's the calibration, it's the setup. You need to look at the whole package, okay? It's like buying a car and then forgetting that you've got to put fuel in it and forgetting that you need to get it serviced and repaired. This is all my car's ever going to cost me. No, it's not. It's an ongoing expense. You need to look at the overall total price and plan for that. And very quickly on that note, acoustic treatment, folks, please, there is no point putting really great gear in a really bad room. Okay, we already talked about that in the room section of this, but I really want to harp on that because it's very important. There is no point having the world's best speakers in the world's worst room. And I've seen things like that, okay? And once people have spent a lot of money, the old emperor's new clothes thing kicks in, and they will sit there and proudly announce that they have got the best system, and I've sat in those rooms and they sound horrendous. Okay? Last but not least, step 10, here we go. Step 10 is learn to use your system, all right? Learn to use your system. What are the settings for? What do you have to use? What do you have to know when you sit down? What do you have to know about the content you're going to look at? Is it in HDR? Is it in Rec 709? What selections do you need to make to optimize the system? Most people don't know when they're watching their Apple TV that everything's been forced to HDR unless you get the settings correct. And I've already referred you to our video on that, which is, I said 400,000 views or something. So, get your Apple TV and your sources set up properly. The number of people who are actually watching an image and it's all wrong is astounding. And yet the relief that people get when they actually discover that, you know, you can correct that, and then they realize just how great the system can look and sound. Okay. Get yourself some reference material now. I just mentioned this. The reason being is you will see flaws in source material, and normally our customers ring up and they say there's something wrong with our home theatre. And when we have a look, there's nothing wrong with it at all. What the problem was you had bad source material. Okay, so have a reference disc or something that you know that looks and sounds amazing. Put it back on, and if it's great, then there's nothing wrong with your system. Okay. And then the last point, and this is really important too, sit back and enjoy. Don't become a pixel peeper and worry about that pixel 720 pixels in and 320 pixels up and wonder if it's not quite the right shade of orange. All right, we've calibrated your system. It's been signed off. Sleep well at night or stay up and watch movies, but most of all, just enjoy it. You know, soak in the pleasure of the work that you've done and what you've achieved in that room. And now you can start to enjoy the fruits of the labors of all the people who created this amazing content for you to watch. And you can, you know, travel not only on this planet, but on any planet known or imagined, and you can look at some of the most incredible, you know, acts and facts of nature, all in this incredible home theater environment that is yours. Okay, so please just enjoy it. All right, so now I'm going to review these 10 points. We're just going to run through them very quickly now. Step 1, knowledge, design, and plan. Okay, the most important ingredient in any home theater. Step 2, the room. Get the acoustics right, get the light right, get the environment right. Paint it black. I know a lot of people, you might go, but we're building a cinema here, folks. Okay. Step 3, seating. Make sure you have a full understanding of the seating required and what implications that has. Step 4, speakers, processors, and amplifiers. Get a grip on that. You have to work a lot of things out to make sure these 3 all work together and that they're going to work in your room with your seats at the distance they are for all seats. Okay. Selecting a screen. Not as easy as it sounds. A lot of calculations to do. Make sure you get it right. Same goes for the projector, making sure that the projector is going to work with the screen in the room and with all of the formats that you intend to watch. Okay, installation, just do it right. You know, get someone who really knows what they're doing and make sure that everything goes where your original plan and calculations said it must go, and don't compromise on that. And if you do find that you're looking at getting to your installation and suddenly something's not right, then start from the beginning, rework your calculations and redesign your room. If you're going to this much effort, if you really are creating a dedicated cinema space, then it's worth just putting a pause on it and reflecting on it and making sure that everything's okay. Setting equipment up, making sure that everything's correct, the settings, your wiring, configurations, all the options in all of your sources, you know, in your displays, in your Apple TV, in your projector, in your amplifiers, processors, you name it. Make sure everything's correct, and then we can verify this with step 9, which is calibration. Get your system calibrated, then you know that you've got the most out of it. Step 10, learn to use your system. It's a bit like owning the car and never learning to drive, you know, and I'm sure some of us have got functions in our cars that we still don't know what they do. Read the manual, find out what your system is capable of, and really enjoy it. Okay, so those are our 10 critical steps in creating the perfect home theatre. Look, I hope it's been useful for you. I hope you've learned something from it. I look forward to hearing your comments. Please tell me what your thoughts are. Obviously, these are overview points. It would take us days to go through every single detail, but I have put this point list, basically the script is down below. But what we'd really like is your support. So please, if you can like and subscribe, this really helps us. Share this with your friends. Ring the bell so you get the notifications. If you think we're doing a good job, say so, because it takes a lot of time and effort to produce these videos because we're obviously busy with the business, but we're trying to get the stuff out there to help other people who can't always access, you know, the commercial side of this industry. All right, so we're trying to help those who perhaps want to do it themselves as well. Okay, so there's a lot of information in there. Take some notes, have another listen, and enjoy it. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for your patience and for listening through this, and I hope that it's been of some benefit to you, and we'll see you again soon in our next video. Thank you very much.